Hey guys, well, it looks like our live stream on X and Substack completely went to shit. They lost the broadcast somewhere 20 to 30 minutes in. So we are going to post the full recording for free for everybody today. I'm sorry for those who tuned in, who wanted to watch the live stream that aren't paid subscribers, can't afford it, that sort of thing. I get it. I know that you tune into live stream because you can't afford a paid subscription, a lot of you. And that's not saying anything bad about you. It's just the reality. So because you couldn't watch the full stream today, I am going to post the full recording for free. And then starting next week, we'll go back to the 30-minute preview with the full recording for paid subscribers. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed your holiday. Happy New Year. And enjoy the full recording of the new Behind the Wall. And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the first Behind the Wall live stream of 2026. As always, I have to give my little pitch before we begin. If you want to watch the full recordings of these live streams, you have to be a paid subscriber at bravenewnormal.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $50 for the year. Paid subscribers receive early access to podcast episodes, exclusive paid-only essays, and access to the full recordings of these live streams with the beautiful Peyman Ascari. There's a million other things. I can't remember the spiel. I can't remember what I usually say. If you want to join the chat, please go to bravenewnormal.substack.com. I know a lot of you are really stubborn and you want to be in the chat on YouTube. Or you want to be in the chat on X. Go to bravenewnormal.substack.com. Let's get everybody there. I can't pay attention to numerous chats all at the same time. I need everything in one place, and bravenewnormal.substack.com is where we're paying attention to the chat. So if you enjoy these live streams and you want to watch the full recording, sign up as a paid subscriber, bravenewnormal.substack.com, or you can subscribe on X at $5 a month, or become a member on YouTube at $5 a month there. If you're a subscriber on X, you do not need to subscribe to both Substack and X. You receive all the same stuff. If you're a member on YouTube, you get everything as well, except for the paid-only essays, because, of course, there's no writing function on YouTube. This was choppy as shit, messy, sloppy, all over the place. It's our first day back after the holiday. My brain is still way out in outer space, so hopefully this all made sense. One other announcement I have. As of next Friday, the Behind the Wall live streams are moving to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I have some things happening in my life, some changes that are being made, which I will be explaining in a solo episode of Brave New Normal that I'll be recording as soon as we're done here. But the time is changing. So if you want to keep up with these live streams, we will be broadcasting at 8 p.m. Eastern every single Friday from here on out. This is the last daytime Behind the Wall broadcast. Peyman Ascari, you beautiful son of a bitch. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year, my brother. So you said you had a few things you wanted to talk about, a few things that you brought up before we started recording. You said you wanted to start with UNDRIP. Break down what UNDRIP is for our viewers and how it's wrenched its claws into everything around us.
Yeah, as always, disclaimer, I'm not the expert on anything, but UNDRIP is a United Nations General Assembly resolution, which is basically like a recommendation, that it's not legally binding. But our government, Canada, has taken that and they've incorporated it provincially in BC through DRIPA. And then federally in Ottawa, I can't remember the name of the act. UNDRIP stands for the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Persons. And it's got a whole bunch of gobbledygook in there. All of these UN documents, they're impossible to read. But what it does is it creates the concept of a global nationhood. And so you got the Indigenous in Canada, Indigenous in America, Indigenous in Australia, Indigenous in New Zealand. And I'm not clear whether they're all considered one global nation or each one of them are their own nation. But the whole purpose of this, it was created by people that don't really have indigenous populations. So if you were Iran and China and Russia and you wanted to screw America and Canada, you would support this bill because it creates, I don't want to say conflict, but it creates internal challenges to the cohesion of the nation. Because now you're saying that the indigenous people, they are their own nation. and you're saying that they're entitled to their ancestral lands, which is, it's a vague term. That's the problem with these laws that are vague. So many of the things that are happening in Canada, in BC right now, somewhat with the Cowichan land ruling, but with everything in general, with the status of private property being in flux, is because of this adoption of this UN recommendation.
Yeah. What's crazy to me about it is just this idea that we can magically undo like hundreds of years of history and go back to, our continent as it existed prior to the colonialists arriving, right? Like there's this idea that like we're going to be able to just hand land rights back over to Indigenous people and everything's just going to go well, and that there's going to be no complications, and that they're going to be as reasonable as we are, which we're not even really very reasonable, because our entire bureaucracy has fallen into a spiral of ideological garbage. But there's this idea that we're just going to be able to hand land rights back, like this whole Landback thing. Like my question, and I'm speaking from the perspective of an Aboriginal person, right? Like I'm Métis, for people who don't know. My mother is Plains Cree Indian. Like this whole Landback thing, like the question I always wanted to ask those people who were, involved in those protests is, okay, you get the land back. What the fuck are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? You have 40 plus million people here in this country. You have 350 plus million in the United States. Who knows how many in Australia and New Zealand and other places. So you get the land back. What are you going to do? You're going to deport 40 million people? Or let's say, the Indigenous population is roughly, let's just say 10% of Canada's population. So you're going to get rid of 36 million people. Where are you going to send them? How are you going to do that? And then once we're all gone, your little fantasy world of like the whole land back thing, where you're going to get back to like a nature-based lifestyle, that's fine for you, but you still live in a world where like there's trade and economies and global markets. Like, how are you going to involve yourselves there? How are you going to compete in the global market? You're going to have to. Right? Your livelihood's depending on it. So what's your fucking plan? And the thing is, they don't have one, because this is all just insanity. It's just stupid. But what we've done is we've allowed these concepts to like permeate global organizations like the UN, right? Or penetrate global organizations like the UN and World Economic Forum and the IMF and the World Bank and China's Belt and Road Initiative and so on and so on and so on, to a point where like now we're actually doing it. And it's fucking insane. Right? Like in Richmond, like this whole thing with the Cowichan ban in Richmond, it's not solved at all. You have David Eby, this guy who's, I read something about him this morning. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he's involved in some pretty despicable shit that's now starting to come out. Like, okay, so how is this going to work? You're handing the land titles over to this group, this band, this Indian band. Okay, so now what? Do they kick everybody out of their houses that they've been paying mortgages for, or even bought outright? Like, what are they like? How does this work? And is this all just a revenge thing? Is this just like, well, you all showed up here roughly 200 years ago and took everything from us, so now we're taking everything from you? Is that what this is based on? Is that what reconciliation is? Revenge? Okay, well, if it's revenge, then what's your plan after? You get your revenge. You take everybody's homes. You take all their property. What are you going to do after that? And they don't have a fucking plan. They don't have one.
Let me share my thoughts. This is sort of, 6 months, 8 months ago, I wouldn't have said this. I would have gotten into trouble. But given the state of our nation right now, we have to be honest. Canada is not, I don't have a dog in this fight, but Canada is not an Indigenous nation. It's not an Aboriginal nation, in the sense that when people come here, or people who came here, settlers, they didn't come here to build an Aboriginal nation. They came here to build an English nation under English law. I'm talking about English common law. And the bedrock of that, you don't have to be a lawyer or a legal scholar, it's property rights. So the law exists so that, somebody has a claim on property, the law will arbitrate that. this is my house, this is my car, this is my spouse, sort of a co-owned property, this is my child, property you hold in trust until they're old. Now, the courts, which are supposed to carry out that function, they've carried out the opposite of that. They've violated the concept of property rights. Now, if you have a treaty, if the government of Canada violates that treaty, that's different. That's wrong. But that's different. You go to court, and if the judges side with the government, again, that's wrong, but that's different. I think, and this is my feeling, what they're saying is it's almost like a catch-22. They're trying to imply that the law existed before England came. I mean, to me, the concept of title and property rights is through English common law, right?
That's so fucking dumb, dude.
Yeah, I think
there were no laws. Like, I talked to Elliot Daniel. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. And
wait. Let me preempt that before you say that.
Yeah.
We're not calling these people that were here savages. We're not attacking them. You yourself are indigenous. So just let's make that clear.
This idea that all of these tribes lived together in perfect harmony prior to the British and the French arriving it's not just incorrect. It's like a detrimental falsehood. They were colonizing each other. They were conquering each other's tribes. They were taking the women and children as slaves and massacring the men. This went on for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, prior to the arrival of the Europeans. Like, there's this misconception that all of these Indian tribes just got along and that they all lived side by side harmoniously on the land and everything was, there's a reason why, like, okay, for example, my tribe, the Plains Cranians, right? So there's this origin, I wouldn't even call it a theory, an origin story of the Indians who came over on the land bridge across from Siberia into North America many hundreds, thousands of years ago, right? But there's also a competing story or narrative of another group of people who came up from the south, and that were not necessarily the same thing. Right. And so, like, the tribe that I'm from, the Plains Cree Indian tribe, we followed the buffalo. We were buffalo hunters. That's why we had a reputation for being vicious and incredibly mean warriors. Right. Because when we ended up having to go into, physical conflict, into battle, we were used to killing. Like, we were the ones who killed. But we followed the buffalo path. We followed the buffalo migration. And a lot of times, contrary to what many people believe, my tribe and other tribes would end up killing more buffalo than there were for replacement, right? So they were nomadic. They had to constantly follow wherever the buffalo, moose, elk, everything were, because at times they would hunt these things to extinction, right? Like this idea that it was just this peaceful, harmonious place, and then the Europeans came and introduced disease and illness and alcohol and porn and all sorts of debauchery into the Indian tribes, and that's why they are where they are. That's only part of the story, right? Like, look, I don't disagree with the idea that the introduction of alcohol destroyed the Indian people. I think that's the main destructive force that arrived with the Europeans. Forget about the disease; it was alcohol. You go to any reservation to this day, and it's just like, I mean, it's alcoholism is the first and most major challenge facing Indian bands, and alcohol arrived with the Europeans, as far as I'm aware. I don't think they understood how to ferment like fruit and make alcohol prior to Europeans introducing that concept to these tribes. But the point is that these tribes existed in conflict for many, many, many years. And not only that, but there are a number of documented stories of the Europeans and the French actually brokering peace deals between warring tribes who had been at war for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the Europeans did good as well. They did good things when they arrived. Now, they brokered these peace deals because these wars, these Indian battles, were getting in the way of trade. So it was self-serving. Like, it's not like they came and they were like, wow, look at all these people killing each other. We should really help solve this problem. No, they didn't give a fuck about those people. In fact, I would imagine that they probably would have been overjoyed had all these people just killed each other, because it would have left everything wide open to them. But they brokered these deals because these wars and these battles were disrupting the supply chain and trade. So they did do good things. It's not like the Europeans just showed up and killed everybody. But that's the myth that we all follow, because it's the one that makes us all feel, I don't know, good.
It's typical lies, like police brutality, all cops are racist kind of thing. It's a lie that takes on a life of its own. I view this as a civilizing movement. So civilization came from England, but Europe, in a pre-civilized society. Like, as you mentioned, there was no, I think it was just might makes right. There were tribes, they were warring. I mean, I'm not an expert on, and by any stretch of the imagination, on Aboriginals and Indigenous in Canada, but I don't think they had anything resembling a constitution, Charter of Rights, a Bill of Rights. It's my understanding they didn't have a written language, which is fine. You don't need written language. You can perpetuate things through stories, but that's because they hadn't reached civilization. They hadn't really industrialized. So that's how I view England coming in. It's kind of like Christianity when it spread. It had a civilizing effect. It introduced values. And one thing that no one's addressing is if they signed treaties with these Indians, because England made the conscious decision not to go to war with them. I think they just realized it's easier if we merge with them. So you sign these treaties. The Indians, presumably, they wanted to mix, right? Like, imagine you're an Indian at this time. Like, you have sticks and stones and maybe some bone and stone axes. And you see these guys coming in with metal and medicine and education. You're probably going to want to merge with that. And in my understanding of the treaties, they said, give us reserves, educate us, give us medicine. Again, if the English didn't honor those treaties, that's wrong. But the Indians wanted to merge. I think the failure of Canada is that something went wrong and we didn't merge. We didn't assimilate. We didn't integrate. And that's the legacy part that I think the powers that be are exploiting to bring things like UNDRIP for their own personal financial gain.
Yeah, look, the whole reservation system, like the thing that I deplore the most about the current state of relations between Indian bands and the Canadian government and even the American government is the existence of reservations. Essentially, what you're creating is it's an isolationist. They're the products of an isolationist point of view on both sides, right? Because Indians want to have their own territory where they can preserve their way of life, but they're also indulging in alcohol, drugs, sexual addiction, sexual abuse, physical abuse of all kinds. They're isolating themselves from the outside world. And then on the other side of that, on the government side, on the bureaucratic side, they see this as just the Indians pushed into a dark corner where they're, sight unseen, right? Like they're out of sight, out of mind. And so now you have this almost like these two worlds that kind of not even coexist with each other. They're just there. And you go to any Indian reservation, I find myself on them quite a bit. You see a noticeable difference in lifestyle, but also an alienation. There's an alienation that people on these reservations experience quite often, and it's an alienation from the outside world. A lot of the Indians on reservations will never leave the reservation, don't want to ever leave the reservation. If they do have to leave the reservation, they feel uncomfortable, right? When you go places and you see reservation Indians, they always kind of have this insecurity that they carry with them, because they're alienated from the outside world. They're not even really sure how to function or operate in that world because they don't spend a lot of time in it. And so, like, my opinion forever has always been, we need to abolish reservations completely. Integration should be what we're after here. You know, I mean, look at right now, like, look at what has hit mainstream news and become the talk amongst all sorts of groups of people recently with the Somali daycares and the Somali migrants in Minnesota. Well, what you have is a community of people that are completely contained, kind of like East Indians here in Calgary. If you go to Northeast Calgary, that's their community. They are totally contained. Right. And it's the same thing with Indian reservations. They're just way off the beaten path. So they don't ever even really integrate with society unless they make the attempt to. But a lot of them, I know, because I talk to a lot of reservation Indians, they're not interested in being part of regular society. And part of that has to do with the fact that they're getting money from the government every month, or they're getting money from the band who gets money from the government for land claims and other various things, right? So there's like this system in place to keep the Indians isolated, and the Indians themselves want to stay isolated and alienated because integration into regular everyday society is too much of a challenge.
I couldn't have put it better myself. I agree with everything you said. The challenges are on both sides. I don't know anything about reserves. I've never lived on one, but my understanding is that it's very socialist, communist, and the fact that they get money from the government, it causes corruption, and that leads to the decay of their living standards. And you know, to deal with that, presumably the tribes and the government turns around and they blame everyone else. This is human nature. You something happens to you because of it's your own fault. You blame everyone else but yourself. So
right, it's a total lack of accountability.
It is. And again, I'm not, you know, neither of us are criticizing them or insulting them, but that you're right. It's a lack of accountability. What was the other thing I was going to say? I have almost zero interaction with anybody that's Indigenous. When I was living in West Van, very rarely would you see it. They never come out. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe it's their fault. But my point is, this is a failed program. This has been going on for 100, 150 years. They've never integrated. It's a nation within a nation, and their nation is failing. I mean, economically speaking. This is a bad thing. And how do you fix it? Because you go in and you're like, all right, we're going to take power away from you, Mr. Chief, and we're going to take money away from you. And now you're going to be, you know, out part of society. They'll be like, oh, screw you. Give us our free water or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's always, you know, been my attitude as well. Like, okay, if you're a sovereign nation, then why are we giving you assistance? Like, shouldn't you be able to do this on your own? Like, if you're your own sovereign territory with your own laws and your own rules, shouldn't we? Why are we paying for that? What are we getting out of it? Like, in that scenario, we need to treat this like we would a trade relationship with the United States or with Germany. Right? Like, we need to say, like, okay, if we're providing you with millions of dollars in aid and assistance, we're going to need to get something in return. What are we getting in return out of this relationship? But then immediately it goes back to, well, colonialism, you put us here, you owe us this, you owe it to us. Well, we gave you your own territory. We gave you your own nation. You have your own country within our country. You have your land back, right? Or at least part of it. So why don't you go off and do what you do? You create your own trade relationships. You handle your own resource extraction. We wish you the best, right? I mean, look at, Indian casinos. Virtually every reservation you go to now has a casino on it if they're smart. We don't interfere. I say we as in people outside of the reservation. We don't interfere with that. And I don't know this for sure, but from what I understand is most of that money is tax free. So they're not paying anything into our systems. Now, I may be wrong there, but that's what I understand. So we're not paying anything they're not paying anything into their systems. And if they are, they're paying very little. So why do you get access to all of our systems when you're a sovereign nation? You know, if you come to Canada from another country and you need to go to the emergency room, you get a fucking bill. That's something Canadians don't know. But if you come to Canada and you something goes wrong and you have to go to the emergency room, you get a bill just like you would in the United States, unless you have travel insurance. So in that event, like if you're a sovereign nation, if you're your own country within our country, then you shouldn't be able to access any of our systems. You should have to have your own, especially if you're running these casinos that are generating, you know, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars a year. You guys should be able to figure it out on your own. You should be able to do your own resource extraction. And that takes it a step further, because now a lot of these sovereign Indian bands are doing business with China. I think I talked about this maybe on a previous live stream, and I think I talked about this recently with Elliot on Brave New Normal. But like what Canadians are unaware of, and Sam brought this to light, is that China is now working with Indian bands on resource extraction and other things, because China realized they can usurp the Canadian government through these sovereign Indian bands. So they're already creating their own trade relationships. Great, go do your thing. Why do we have to continuously play catch up and continuously bend over on these people's behalf? You've got your sovereign territory. You are your own sovereign nation. Behave as such, and we're going to cut off the funding.
So you mentioned two things in there. One is the sovereignty. The other one is China. The second one ties into UNDRIP. So sovereignty, again, you're absolutely right. And it's causing friction amongst the Canadian citizenry that's paying taxes. They're paying taxes, and then people turning around and calling them racist. And, you know, people are getting fed up. So, but it's hard to overcome that, because you go to the public education system and they say, well, all white people are racist, all Canadians are settlers, blah, yada, yada, what we discussed. You mentioned, like, you know, your sovereign nation should go up and open yourself up to trade in China. That's one of the purposes of UNDRIP. So I mentioned that the four people that originally objected to it: Canada, America, Australia, and New Zealand. These four have, you know, sizable Aboriginal populations. China, that puts this bill forward or supports this bill, recognizes that it's going to disrupt the cohesion within a country, and it's going to make it easier for it to come in and go around the federal government. Not that our federal government is good anyway, but at least in theory, one centralized national government can put up tariffs, you know, put up restrictions. So you got to build a hospital. But if they go directly, if they give the land transferred to the Aboriginals, the Indigenous, they can go communicate with them directly and perhaps get more favorable terms. Ideally, you would just completely balkanize it and you break Canada up into like 100 different republics, and then you can deal with them on terms like that. That is another purpose of UNDRIP. I would say that's probably the principal purpose.
Okay. So let's dig into UNDRIP now. So we have that first. So Peyman, let's back it up here. You think that the principal purpose is to break up like Western nations into small, tiny little territories of sovereign Indian land surrounded by the previously existing country?
Yeah. And I can't, point to a document to prove that, but think of it this way. If you are an entity that's BP, Exxon, I don't know, De Beers, and any one of these things that you're just thinking about money, right? You recognize that one united America is very difficult to deal with. But if you cause a civil war and you break it up into a couple of countries like they tried to do, they're easier to deal with. Same thing with Canada. Same thing with Russia. When you have a united people that act as a civilization, it's harder to break them up and to abuse them. They tried to do it with Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union. It didn't work. Canada, post-nationalism. We have now broken up what it means to be Canada. So we're like 50% of the way there to being balkanized. And with the chaos and the confusion, countries like China or England or not even countries, just BlackRock, all these corporations, they love it. More profits for them, less stays within the countries.
Fuck. I never even thought about it like that, man. I mean, I should have. You know what's interesting is that you put China in there, and that just more lends to the idea that all of this neoliberal ideology is coming from China, piped in specifically for these purposes. Because the truth is, like, look, if you embolden these Indian tribes through policies like UNDRIP, that's essentially what you're doing. You're balkanizing the country. Because if you have 100, 150, 200 sovereign nations within your nation, each one entitled to its own rights and its ability to create its own constitution, you're essentially creating chaos, because there's no way that we can operate as a society like that. There's no way we can operate as a nation in that context. There's just no way. And yeah, it's a brilliant way of breaking things apart. Because you're right, like countries like China, they want to create that chaos. And then you have, parasites like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street that are just looking to take advantage of scenarios like those.
Yeah, no, this is nothing new. I think you mentioned it. The Chinese prefer to work with the local bands in Canada. You've mentioned this multiple times. Look at the climate change thing. So China is 100% supporting climate change initiatives because they don't apply to them. They apply to us, but not them. So we're deindustrializing while they're industrializing. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're using all of these NGOs. And another thing, the United Nations, when the US was strong and they controlled everything, the UN was, it supported the West. But the problem with the UN is everybody gets one vote. And yes, you have veto, but you get things like China and you get things like the Muslim Brotherhood, no fan of the West, like Saudi Arabia, when it loves passing laws in the UN that impact Canada, but not themselves. That's another problem with the UN.
Yeah, dude, sorry. While you were talking, we lost Substack. I'm sorry, everybody. Fuck, man, this is so annoying, dude. Sorry, guys. If you guys can see this on YouTube or on X, I apologize, everybody. Substack dropped the stream for some reason. I have no idea why, but we're already into the stream. So you guys, I apologize if you're watching the recording of this and you lost the stream. Everything's just going wrong today. So sorry, guys. Peyman, let's continue on with that thread. I'm sorry, dude. I was super distracted there for like 10 minutes. So can you just recap what you just said, just into a bite-sized piece?
Yeah. The UN, it gives equal voice to people that aren't like us. When I say us, I mean Canada, the West. So Saudi Arabia, they'll support any pro-Muslim policy that then impacts Canada because they know they can bring Muslims here. Look, everybody wants to export their ideas. Christians would love to do it. Jews, I guess they do it. But Muslims, think of them, they're exporting their ideas to Canada to get a foothold here and destabilize the country. Not that Saudi Arabia does that too much, but that's my criticism of the UN.
It really feels like we're being attacked at all angles with the explicit intent to destroy the West. Because I was talking to somebody from Ireland last week, and they were telling me about what's happening in Ireland. It's the same thing. The same thing is happening in every single Western nation across the Western Hemisphere. And not to go too far down the conspiracy path, which I'm known to do, but this has to be intentional. It has to be done. They have to be doing this on purpose, because what else? How else could this all be happening everywhere at the same time?
I was listening to a podcast and the lady said that this started in 1971 when Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. Attention shifted from an industrial base and national. Is it more tech problems?
No, go ahead. I'm just.
Attention shifted from an industrial base and national borders and tariffs and people to financialization. Like when your money is funny money, you just start playing with it, gambling, derivatives, and it's gone so out of control that now you have this class of super people, globalists, that have no national allegiance. And when I said, imagine external organizations like BlackRock, Exxon, BP, or China, City of London, these people, they view these countries not as their brethren, not as their country of birth, but they just view them as markets to be exploited. So they don't really care. And when you have that mindset, and somebody comes and says to the CEO of that company, "Sir, it's you have a fiduciary responsibility to the corporation, and it's in our interest to they wouldn't say destabilize, to have multiple Canadian provinces sovereign as opposed to one Canada sovereign." That's the way that they think. That's why the West is getting attacked.
So do you think that perhaps like this Alberta sovereignty thing has anything to do with that?
Yes and no. Ultimately, it does, but bigger than Alberta would be Brexit and MAGA. Those were the two that pushed back in theory. Brexit didn't change anything in practice. MAGA, it's all up in the air whether they managed to oppose the globalists. Alberta's messaging is not "we are anti-globalist," but the adversary, the opponent that they recognize, the existential threat, which is Ottawa, is globalist. So they are indirectly, in an indirect way, yes, it's a result of that.
Yeah, because that's I mean, which is strange, right? Because okay, in Canada right now, we are a sinking ship. We know it. We're going down. And Alberta separating from Canada might be the only way to save the West. Because Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan follows, BC will have to come with us. They'll have no choice. But does that serve this agenda? Does Alberta's separation serve this agenda to break up Western nations and destroy them?
I get what you're asking. I put it this way. When Lincoln fought the Civil War, they were trying to do the same thing and separate it back then. The country had the political will to stay together, even after they assassinated him and he couldn't, enforce the peace. I don't think Canada has that political will anymore. Just go talk to the Canadians. They're just beat down, demoralized. They're just watching porn all day anyway. They give a shit about any of this. So I know I said that what they want is to separate Canada into multiple different nations to control them better. Mm-hmm. But what we have right now is not any better. We have an infiltrated federal government that's attacking its citizenry.
Yeah. So going back to UNDRIP, where are we right now in that process?
Like I mentioned, they've incorporated. So UNDRIP has no legal bearing in Canada, but they've incorporated it provincially and federally. So now they basically grafted it onto us. So it's a part of our laws, and it's that vague notion of their ancestral lands. They're entitled to their ancestral. What does that mean? I'm a Persian. Mm-hmm. Can I go to Greece and say, "Hey, this is part of my ancestral land. Give me this, give me that"? So it's a very bad law with intention of destroying and just the rule of law in any country, and that's where we're at. And we'd have to repeal these bills, and I don't know. I mean, as it stands, this country it's teetering on the edge.
And so UNDRIP is just a UN policy, and so therefore Canada is following just as a faithful member of the UN. There's nothing legally binding about it?
No, you're asking a good question. So the UN General Assembly, they make recommendations. Imagine they show up, they're all drunk, they're like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had this? What if we had that?" That's the UN General Assembly. And they print this out and they give it to member countries, and they're like, "Hey, if you like this, consider passing a law within your own country similar to this one." I don't think it's not related to the UN at all. We just took the law that they wrote. It could have been written by the World Economic Forum, and then we passed it provincially, so it applies to provincial land, which is most of your land is provincial. and it applies federally to federal land, which is mostly in the territories.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just wild how, like, our countries, I was thinking about this last night. I think I've talked about this a few times, but I've been reading back through Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, which was he followed the George McGovern campaign in 1972 when he was running against Nixon, and George McGovern lost in one of the biggest landslide victories in American history, right? But in that book, Thompson writes a lot about, like, just the general malaise, like the disconnect that Americans had with their political class during that period, right? Because they were coming out of a very tumultuous time, the 1960s. Nixon was kind of dangling some form of peace agreement with North Vietnam over the over the American cultural and media environment, right, to kind of keep people on the hook. And but what he describes, the atmosphere that Thompson describes in that book, is very much like the one that we're experiencing today, where we don't see a real way out of where we are now, and in a lot of ways it just feels like a foregone conclusion, which makes me wonder if it's just always been this way, but now, because the internet, because of people like me and you being able to broadcast our voices, it just feels more intense, because we have access to all of the, well, not all, but a lot of the nuts and bolts that makes this stuff move, right? And then, you have people like, Whitney Webb out there, who does these, like, insane deep dives, who I will say at times she draws connections which are a stretch at best. But she does a lot of really good work. And there's a lot of people like her. I mean, there's tens of thousands of people like her doing this on a daily basis. You just had Nick Shirley, this citizen journalist guy with a YouTube channel, crack open perhaps the biggest fraud story in American history, right? Or at least in recent American history. So we have all this information that we have access to. So even though it's always been this way, now we can just see it. Before, we had the ability to live in total ignorance because we didn't know what was happening 2 towns over, let alone on the other side of the world or even on the other side of the country. And now, like, we can see it. We can see it all happening, and I always want, not always, I often wonder, like, how much of, like, what we saw happen, say, for example, with the Vietnam War, or even more recently, the Iraq War, Desert Storm in the 90s, like, how much dirty shit was going on around that? I mean, a lot, we know now. But remember, at the time, like, there was just that narrative. I mean, in the US, the Vietnam narrative didn't really hold, because eventually the voices came through and the journalists were doing their jobs. And that's what created the turmoil around that war in the United States. But like, I just wonder, like, how much of this is, like, the end of that road that we were on back then. Like, are we hitting the wall? Are we about to drive over the cliff? Or is it just this perpetual race toward nothing that we never really reach the end of, because there's always another group, another country, another people to be exploited?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing with this malaise on the campaign trail, people have applied it to the media. So they say, Peyman, it's not that the media has gotten worse and they're lying more. It's just you didn't pay attention before. They apply it to government. It's not that the government's more corrupt. It's just, nobody was reporting on the corruption before. There was no social media. Same thing with the military, the Vietnam example. I mean, you take it all the way back. It's not just Iraq, but Smedley Butler, in the 20s, 30s. He's talking about all the wars that he was involved in.
War is a Racket. That's right. And that's people, you can download that PDF. It's a really important read if you haven't read it yet. It's called War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler.
I got to read that. Yeah. I was talking to my friend, Andre Milosh, and I said, the Roman Republic, it took 150 years for it to collapse. America's collapsed in about 10 years, like since Trump got in. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how is this possible? And he said, because they didn't have social media during the Roman Republic. So
Yeah.
social media might be accelerating these things, but I don't have an answer for your question of basically you're asking, like, are we just wasting our time? Is this just human nature?
I'm not even really asking if we're just wasting our time. I'm wondering if this is just business as usual, but we're all waking up to it. And is it possible for us to change course? Is it possible for us to change the way our countries and our banks and our financial systems and markets operate? Is it possible for us to change that? I don't know. I don't know. And that's the thing. Like the thing I've really been thinking about lately is, what can we actually change? What can we do? And I'm going to be talking about this in my episode of Brave New Normal, which is a solo episode, because there's a lot going on in my life and a lot of things that I feel I need to share with the people who listen to Brave New Normal so that they understand the changes that are coming. But I've been thinking a lot about what actually matters, what matters here, because like I can't go on X anymore. It's just every single day an endless feed of shit, and it's all conjecture and speculation. I have been led astray by so many trusted voices on X over the last couple months that I will not touch it as a resource for information. I am back to reading ground news and Substack every day. I cannot open X, right? So, but I just have the wherewithal to recognize it, because I'm really trying. This year, or 2025, I really tried to get over whatever biases I had that were guiding my viewpoint and perspective, and doing a better job of seeing the full picture. But it's like you go on X and you're just fucking inundated with an onslaught of shit, and it's impossible to parse through what is information and what is just speculation and conjecture. What is just somebody saying something to grab your attention? What is something that is carefully crafted in order to hold your attention and generate ad dollars? And so that's I think like the real tragedy of our era is that we have so much access to everything all the time. However, there's so much of it that we can't agree on anything. And to make matters worse, our entire lives are lived within an algorithmic bubble that we cannot escape. Because if you use social media, if you use the internet in any way, the algorithms are picking up what you're looking at and feeding you what it thinks will keep you engaged. So you're not getting an alternate perspective or an alternate viewpoint. And so if it may be possibly, potentially, we're in worse shape than we were 50 years ago with all the access that we have now. Like we're completely lost. And yes, you have people like me and Peyman out there, but there's millions of us. There's millions of people, average everyday people turned commentators, who are broadcasting on a daily fucking basis. And how many of those people know what they're talking about? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, how did you and I used to function? Think about our parents when we were, 10 to 15. They got their information from newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall my father ever wasting his time with this nonsense the same way you and I are doing. Like his focus was, he was a builder. He'd build single unit homes. So he knew that. He knew how many inches in a foot, how many feet in a mile.
Yeah.
He read books, spiritual books, I guess, philosophical books. But I don't remember him connecting the dots between the city of London and this and that and the other. So, yeah, maybe we're just wasting our time.
I don't know if we are, though, because on the other side of it, right, it's like we know that the digital ID is rolling out. It's coming against the will of the people, right? Because, excuse me, guys, the British people have spoken up. They don't want to have anything to do with the digital ID. Canadian people aren't saying shit because whatever. Once again, we're asleep at the wheel. I mean, I was going to talk about this on the podcast episode, but there's a reason why Canada is falling apart the way that it is. There's a reason why the rest of the world is looking at us almost like they looked at Russia in 1918, where it's like, what the fuck is happening? What is going on with you guys? Like, there's a reason why people have taken a sudden interest in us, and it's not a good thing. And the Canadian people are just still living in their fantasy world where nothing is really bad is happening and nothing is going on. And that's why digital ID is going to work here, right? Like the way it's being rolled out, the GC wallet, for people who want to know what it's called. If you go on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, the GC wallet is already there. You can download it. That is your new digital ID. The GC wallet is being rolled out for people who accept social assistance, so welfare, employment insurance. If you're a new refugee to Canada and you need social assistance, vouchers, things like that, it's all coming through your GC wallet, through your digital ID. And they're going to quietly do it that way for the next few years, and then they'll roll it out nationally. And Canadians are just going to swallow it up. They're just going to take it. It's like we're just the most apathetic, neutered people, you know? So I think in the other way too, it's like we're not wasting our time because we're talking to millions of people who are finding us slowly, but surely they're finding us, and we're speaking to them and confirming, I think in a lot of cases, just confirming that their suspicions are not crazy, that they're not schizophrenic, that like, yeah, this stuff is really happening and your suspicions are correct. Your instincts are telling you the right thing. So I think on that level, like we are doing a service, we are doing something important. And that's why podcasters and, independent media has become arguably more powerful than the legacy media and the mainstream, because people, I think, are looking for truth. But the question is, right, is it doing us any good to know the truth?
You just dropped that on me, so I have to believe that it is, but let me answer that in a different way. If somebody asked me what's the one thing that's changed in your lifetime, like what people from the 80s to compared to today, I'd say like that the amount of decisions that are being made within the family have drastically reduced. So, when I was a kid, I remember I went to Germany with my parents. We went to a bank. My dad, withdrew some money from the bank. That was between the family, my parents, and the bank. Well, now the government's gotten in the middle of that with regulations. And, the digital ID is a sort of an extension of that. Same thing could be applied with energy. When I was a kid, you would go buy coal from the store. Now energy is provided by some conglomerate that the province owns and is regulated. So maybe that's my way of saying back then they did know a lot the same way we know, but the shit that we know is meaningless. This person at the City of London was part of the Rhodes Scholarship Association, whereas back then they kind of knew the difference between heavy water and the opposite water or whatever. They knew how to fix a pipe. They knew how to start a fire. They knew all of this stuff. Now we've replaced it with the names of porn stars and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's it. And the thing that I find incredibly ironic is that, we were given access to all of the knowledge in the known universe, and it actually made us dumber. Again, I don't know if knowing the truth is a good thing. Because the thing is that these groups, these families, these people have been operational globally for hundreds of years. I mean, even thousands of years, if you want to trace the lineage all the way back to, the very beginning, to the Pharisees and the Roman Empire, right? But like this game that we're all inside of, this simulation, this game that we're all playing has been played for a very, very, very long time. It just so happens that now, because of the internet and our ability to communicate with each other and our ability to share information, we're aware of it. But what the fuck does that even mean? Because they continue on behaving as if we're not aware of it. And what's our only way out? Well, revolution. Okay, we have a revolution. Then what happens? We just burn everything down? Then what? What new system do we create? How do we protect ourselves against human nature? Because naturally, you see this throughout history, right? Every revolution creates a vacuum, right? And whoever plugs that hole, whoever fills that hole, most of the time happens to be the most totalitarian, the most vicious of them all who are fighting in that power vacuum. So then you create something worse than what you had before. And I don't know, right? Because like, again, look, the Russian Revolution is a really good example. You had Tsarist Russia, where you have this oppressive royalty, that were exiling people and sending people to Siberia for having anti-Tsarist thoughts and sharing anti-Tsarist sentiments. And then you have the Russian Revolution that overthrows the Tsar. And then you have Lenin and Stalin that creates something infinitely worse than Tsarist Russia. Turns it into something worse. And that happens everywhere all the fucking time whenever you have revolution. So it's like, it's weird because it's like, I don't want to be the guy that comes to the conclusion that like, hey, plug my nose, close my eyes, and just dive into the darkness. And that's what this is going to be. I want to believe that we're able to stop it, that we're able to turn this around and change something. But on the same hand, if we change it, what are we changing it into?
I think you're talking about like a drastic change all at once, and it really only has ever worked in America, and it caused, even that caused problems. Like they had financial issues and solar wars. But the only thing I think is feasible right now in Canada is for people to make local decisions and protect themselves. I always say, like, distance yourself from people that are asleep, because when things go bad and they wake up, they're gonna use you as a crutch. Try to save money, try to figure, and don't just save cash, save things that you can barter with, like bullets or, jarred pickled foods. Learn how to be more self-sustaining, learn how to educate your kids yourself. You don't be dependent on the state. That's all we can do. And just hope that things get a little bit better, not infinitely worse like it's happening right now.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the only real answer is to just think locally. Think about your community, your neighborhood. But that's the thing is, like, look, we get digital IDs, then we get central bank digital currencies. And I think that, again, I've spent a lot of time the last few weeks really thinking about like what I've done in the last few years with Brave New Normal and the podcast and where I want to go. And I was thinking too, like, maybe, look, by no means do I think a digital ID or a central bank digital currency or, 15-minute cities or any of this dystopic shit that we are about to be thrusted into is a good idea. By no means do I think any of it is good for humanity whatsoever. But the thing that I was thinking too is, like, maybe I did a disservice to waking people up by being too alarmist about it. By being too much of an alarmist, because the reality is, if you have, say, for example, like congenital heart failure, and you have a digital ID and you suddenly pass out walking down the street one day, and somebody can just open your phone and through your ID contact an ambulance, the ambulance immediately, the paramedics who arrive on the scene have immediate access to your medical records, know exactly what's wrong with you. Not only that, but you're being surveilled, so they can locate you immediately. They can find you on GPS. Let's say nobody is around and you have congenital heart failure and you pass out, you fall, your heart stops beating, right? And there's some sort of biometric ID tied to your digital ID that tells the people surveilling you that you've just fucking flatlined, and that they can send an ambulance to you and save your life through your digital ID. Maybe that's not such a bad thing.
I know you're just making an argument, like devil's advocate, and I'm sure that's the way the government thinks. The way I look at it, first of all, you're not wasting your time. You're educating people and you're giving them hope by bringing them this information. But what's the point of living if you don't feel alive? Like we've grown so afraid of death that everything we do is about bubble wrapping life so that nothing bad can ever happen, and it's just increasing costs. And I think it's one of the reasons that we have such low birth rates. Back in the day, you have like 24 children, and like 75% of them don't make it. You're like, yeah, that was a good harvest. So the value of life has changed.
Yeah, I guess. I just look at it like, I want to make this clear. I am vehemently opposed to a digital ID or a central bank digital. I am opposed to all mechanisms of control. That includes religion. I have Jesus Christ around my neck, but I've said this before in the past, and I'll say it again. I am a follower of Jesus Christ and nobody else. That means I am not a traditional religious Christian. I am not a follower of Paul the apostle. I am a follower of Jesus Christ and Jesus' teachings only. I recognize fully that religion is just another mechanism of control, and I am opposed to that as well. I am opposed to all things that seek, all systems that seek to control humanity and human behavior for its own benefit. Now, of course, you have moral codes that we all follow that do control us, but they enrich and benefit the society at large and us as individuals. But I am opposed to things like a digital ID or a central bank digital currency. I just think that maybe it's time to talk about them more realistically, about the pros and the cons, so that we can have discussions with people who may be on the pro side, that they can see the error in their thinking. Because the thing I feel like a lot of the time is that we're just screaming into the void and speaking and preaching to a choir, that we're not talking to anybody new or anybody that we could maybe turn around and bring over to our side, because they don't see it this way. We just see each other as fucking lunatics, right? Like when I see like all the I hate to use the word woke because woke is so dead. But when I see like the radical left stuff, like recently with this Nick Shirley thing, you're watching legacy media in the United States do this like crazy death spiral to try to cover up what's happening in Minnesota with the billions of dollars that have been lost due to fraud, right? When I see those mental gymnastics, I'm like, it's hard to wrap my mind around that anybody would go along with that or believe it, right? Like, it's like they're deceiving themselves. But then I wonder, on the flip side of that, if they look at us the same way. So this year, I'm really trying to figure out how to bridge that gap so that we can all talk to each other and have these discussions and open people up to the probability that maybe things aren't, that our government doesn't have our best interests in mind, and in return, close down the speculative bullshit, the stuff the noise, shut out the noise and get right to the core of it and have those discussions so we can bridge the gap between the two sides so we can all see the same thing.
Yeah, you can try to do it. So the way I would do it, and I've done it with some people on the left, is so you figure out a problem. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about climate change. Okay, what should be the solution? Carbon tax. And people say carbon tax is good, carbon tax is bad. What's the premise of carbon tax? Government exists to manage society, right? Like that's why the government would implement a carbon tax. And then one side says that's the purpose of government. The other side says, no, that's not the purpose of government. Government exists to facilitate commerce between individuals. And you could try that, and maybe you'll find some common ground. The challenge is you get to a point where, like the Muslim says pork is bad, and the Christian says pork is good. And it's like, okay, fisticuffs.
But again, right? Like you actually did. That was a great example, because we often miss the forest for the trees in that way. Like, we look at our silly little rituals as being like, well, we eat pork, you don't eat pork, therefore fuck you, fuck me, fuck all of us. We're not going to talk to each other. Whereas there are bigger, like, we get lost in the minutia, right? Like, there are bigger issues to tackle. And while we're arguing over who eats pork or how somebody worships or whose God is the real God, these jackals, these global elites that have always been doing exactly what they're doing now are shutting or closing in the walls on us. with these digital prisons, because the digital world has given them the opportunity to create a global surveillance state. The gulags aren't necessary anymore.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, you're describing. So there's two things that I see that you're talking about. One is what our friend JP always says. It's not left, right; it's top down. Like we have to look up, and so that's one way that you could bridge that divide. So you're bringing someone from the left, someone from the right. Say, what's the common ground? Let's think strategically. The other thing, and this is, you can still do it. You bring someone from the left and someone from the right. Chances are both those people are thinking not logically, not with reason, but with emotion. So that's why they dig in and they double down. And that takes time. When I say time, it takes decades for you to change your opinion. But you can still plant the seed, because once you bring somebody, I'm going to use the left, you bring somebody from the left and you drill down and you identify, okay, so in your mind, the role of government is to keep you safe or to manage society. That sticks with them forever. Maybe in 20 years, they're gonna reevaluate their position based on how you framed it. They'll be like, man, Jason James was right. I no longer believe this is the purpose of government. It could apply to the right as well.
It could. I just, I really see a necessity for getting down to the brass tacks and us being able to agree on at least some of the tangible aspects of it that is happening right in front of us that we can all see, and helping the people on the other side get over their fear of acknowledging it, and then helping the people on our side get over the tendency to speculate. And for all of us, it's like something that I saw that was really inspiring for me during the holiday was Matt Taibbi took a position on the Epstein files that was very, very unpopular, right? He was saying that, as people were going through the files and you saw the photos and reports that were popping up on social media, what he kept pointing to is the fact that none of this is hard evidence of anything. Like, these are just names and emails, things that are maybe things that are alluded to, but not concretely defined or concretely said in the communications. Like, what he was trying to do essentially was teach average people how to be journalists, and how and Michael Tracy was doing this as well. I saw online, and trying to show people that, like, hey, just because this treasure trove of stuff, these documents are out there, it doesn't concretely prove anything. And he took a lot of shit for it because, of course, Jeffrey Epstein is Satan himself, right? And, Jeffrey Epstein is often referred to as a pedophile in media. But something Matt Taibbi said is, and I agree with, is there's no conclusive evidence to suggest that Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. Like, by journalistic standards and by legal standards, you have to prove without a doubt. And there's no such proof out there right now. And I think for myself in 2026, that's where I'm going to focus more of my energy on, is like, okay, what can we concretely prove is actually happening? Like this UNDRIP thing, we can prove that because you can read the UNDRIP documents and you can see the policy being implemented, particularly in British Columbia. So we know that that's happening for a fact, right? And we can speculate on what's going to come out of it, where that's all going to lead. But for myself, and I know for you as well, Peyman, because you're a guy who fucking lives in the documents. I mean, I swear to God, you have the multiple constitutions imprinted on the inside of your skull. So you're very by the paper, by the book, right? And it's okay to speculate, but I think what we have to do is we have to separate speculation from information. We have to, when we're speculating, make it clear to the people listening and to the audience and to the people reading our stuff that we are just speculating, that we don't know for sure. So that when we do know for sure, people can take us at our word, because I think that's the hard thing for me now, is like listening to podcasts, reading people's stuff. I don't know what the fuck is like, I don't know what's real anymore. And somebody said, I saw somebody say in the chat here that, you know, it's part of the psyop, right? To just overload people with information. And I did read a document from the CIA that was actually the course they decided to take. Early on in COVID, it was shut everybody down, censor, shut everybody. And then what they realized was that it was having a Streisand effect, that when you would cancel somebody, when you would take them off the internet, it just amplified their voice by like a million times. Right? It just made them a million times stronger and louder than they were before. So what they did instead was they did the opposite, was to just overload the internet with noise so that nobody could tell what's real and what isn't. And now here we are, like nobody knows what's true and what isn't. And we tend to gravitate toward the stuff that we want to believe the most, or the stuff that we instinctually feel is true. But we don't know for sure if something's true or not anymore.
I understand what you're trying to say. So with me, partly because my integrity is important to me, but also because I'm a researcher. So I'm very careful. I say like, to the best of my knowledge, I am not an expert. In my humble opinion, you know, like you preface these things and you try to be as accurate with your phrasing, but then nobody wants to hear that shit, right? So nobody watches this show. You get somebody like podcaster comes out with bombshell report. Mark Carney proven to be a pedophile. Killed 3 babies. That's what generates clicks. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that, dude, you just killed it. Yes, that's exactly it. It's about generating clicks, and ad revenue has nothing to do with bringing or presenting anything to the real world. And the thing is, what these people are doing in doing that is they are hurting the potential for that, for the actual real message to emerge and reach the people that it needs to reach. Right? They're clouding, they're creating more noise. And I have to wonder how many of those people might actually be working on behalf of intelligence agencies or governments.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. You and I are probably thinking of the same person right now. It could be. I mean, I've talked to JP about this too. There's certain people out there, they're just destabilizing. They're putting out this messaging. And it's not really helping the average Canadian. It's not a fact-finding mission. It's not about the truth. It's about putting out a narrative. And you're right. It could be harming us.
Yeah, it really could be. And so, speaking of narratives, Peyman, I want to switch over to, you wanted to talk about the unrest that's currently happening in Iran. Let's go for it, man. Break it down. What's going on over there?
We don't have to spend too much time. It's basically a color revolution. That's my interpretation of it. There was some mass unrest. People are fed up with the Islamic government. They're just a horrible government. They've mismanaged the economy. And you can't repress people and mismanage the economy. That's the trick. China can take away people's freedoms, but they're giving economic viability, economic opportunity. In Iran, the protests are getting worse and worse. Let's back up. For people that are following it, there was a terrorist attack in Bondi Beach, Australia, and immediately Israel blamed Iran. They said Iran was behind the attack on the Jewish civilians, and they sent Mossad there to investigate. Doesn't matter whether you support that or not. What matters is that Israel is on a path to conflict with Iran, and I see this as a continuation of that. Like, they're just activating these people. So basically, the Iranian people, they're being used to destabilize Iran, make it weaker. I think Israel wants to take Iran off the chessboard so that they can focus on Turkey. From the perspective of the Iranian citizens, they have no problem with that. If Israel, Mossad, CIA is behind the destabilization and toppling of the Islamic Republic, in a way, they're helping the people of Iran. That's how I view what's going on.
So what outcome do you want to see?
I have to be careful. Iranians hate it when I say this. They absolutely hate it because they're like, screw you, Peyman. You're comfortable in, Canada or Florida, wherever you are. It's the Iranian people that are suffering. But I don't like the city of London. Even the divorce between the city of London and America, I see this as Israel pursuing its greater Israel project. And I don't like power. I want people to be free. I want them to be sovereign. But none of this matters. This is up to the Iranian people. If they want to support Israel and America in toppling their own government, they can do that. Just like here in Canada, if we want to support America to help Alberta separate, we can do that. It's whatever they want to do.
What do you think? See, this is another one of those situations, right, where it's like from a superficial point of view, top layer point of view, you think, well, this is a great thing because we can depose this fundamentalist Islamic regime that has controlled Iran. We can free the people, right? Women specifically, and especially. And we can turn back the clock in Iran to pre-revolutionary days where they were a functioning liberal democracy. But if we do that, then we're giving Iran goes to Israel, becomes part of the greater Israel project, and becomes a pawn in Israel's scheme to control that entire part of the world. And what does that mean then in terms of the Iranian people?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Sorry, I think I framed it poorly. It's not. They call it the Greater Israel Project. I don't know. They're trying to take over Palestine. I don't think it's going to work. But it's the globalists. It's this globalism thing that bothers me. So right now you have America that's pulling away from Europe, and I support that. I think deep down Donald Trump wants to get the hell out of the Middle East, but he's got so many Zionist backers that he can't. So he's constantly. Netanyahu went back to America a few days ago. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what a surprise. Right after he's there, Donald Trump puts out this tweet that says, or this truth, if Iran fires on its own civilians, America will get involved. This is what Iran does. I mean, whenever there's unrest, they spray bullets into the crowd, which is, I'm not advocating for that. But basically, Trump recognizes that if that's their weapon, then he's disarming the Iranian regime from being able to put down protests. All I'm saying is, if this happens, and if the Iranian regime is toppled, and if they bring this puppet Pahlavi, the son of the former king, and they put him in there, all of a sudden you're going to give all these contracts to Western companies. They're going to start buying up what they've done to Canada in buying up all our corporations and everything is run by the Americans. That's going to happen in Iran, and Iranians will go along with it because they'll get their freedom nominally. They'll get some of their freedoms back, and if things get worse and worse, they will never recognize that it's because American interests have gone in and bought up all the assets. Like BlackRock is basically just going to own the country.
And that's what I mean. Like, it's so murky, you know. And sorry, I should have clarified when I was talking about Israel prior to this. I was actually talking about it in the context that you were.
No, it's my fault. I phrased it badly.
But as a proxy for the globalist agenda, right? But, you know, and it's so strange because, again, it feels like there's no way out. Because, yes, the Iranian people get their freedom. They finally get rid of this brutal Islamic fundamentalist Islamic regime that they've been living under for what, almost 50 years now?
Yeah, 79.
Yeah, 79. So what? Yeah, so just under 50 years. So they finally escape from this brutal theocracy, just to be shuffled into like this global order controlled by fascism.
You know, it's actually worse. It's worse. It's worse.
You know what? You got to get a shirt that says, you know, it's actually worse.
Yeah. It's worse than you can
It's amazing.
I'm going to get that. Iran was a vassal of the U.S. under the Shah, and they dared to question, you know, the ruling nation on the planet, America, and America punished them for 45 years. a lot of this is their own fault. The regime was corrupt, but they punished them with sanctions. They
Right.
punished them by vilifying them in the media, denying them access to technology, and now that punishment, which is in part, somewhat, wholly responsible for their misery, they're going back to their former master.
Yeah, but that's it, right? Like they're going back to their former master, and their master just so happens to be the nucleus of a global death cult, right? Like I know that a lot of people want to believe, and I at times want to believe, that the United States is a different place with Donald Trump at the wheel. But the reality is it's no more different than it was when Barack Obama was at the wheel or Joe Biden. There are certain things that a Donald Trump can do that are great things. But I think after this first year of his second administration, we can agree that there are a lot of things that he can't do and things that are off limits and things that he can't change even if he wants to change them. And so it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just today. It's the fact that I'm doing this for the first time in a couple of weeks and I haven't really put much thought into any of this, but it just feels like in a lot of ways, like there's no way out. That the only way out is like a large global revolution across all Western nations that happens simultaneously. But then again, you create that power vacuum, and what fills that gap? And 9 times out of 10, nothing good ever fills that gap, because the group that tends to rise to the top and assume power and control are the ones who are the most vicious and brazen. And maybe this is just a period where we're coming to terms with human nature. We're coming to terms with what we are. That although we are this brilliant, innovative, creative, artistic species, we are also savages, murderers, thieves, and marauders at the same time. We're both those things. And maybe this is just that period where we're coming to realize that, like, we are as ugly as we are beautiful. And how do we magnify the beauty and dull the ugliness? And look, if you ask me, I think a journey into the spiritual realm is the only way to really do that. And I mean, like, through some form of a relationship with a higher power. But maybe there's other ways. I don't know. I just feel like we're in the middle of this reckoning, and none of us can really reconcile any of it with our own thoughts or who we are as people, because there's so much of it happening everywhere all the time. But eventually this thing has to end, and either it ends with the death of our species or an emergence of a new way. That's my opinion on it. I think.
No, I mean, you could be right. I mean, spirituality and belief in a higher power, it definitely changes it. My biggest disappointment the last few years is I realized that we've been lied to all our lives. They keep saying we're a democracy. We have rule of law. And I see our country drifting towards countries like China, like Iran. I mean, look at Helen Bruce. Proud, patriotic, strong detective, tried to do the right thing, but because the government disagrees with what she did, they're ruining her life. And we're all standing by. Same thing with Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, Kathy Drake is another one. She just got hit with a $100,000, I believe, lawsuit for calling someone a groomer. There's no justice in this world.
Well, the problem is that these smaller stories aren't getting any sunshine beneath the big ones, right? And again, maybe this has to do with the death of legacy media and the death of the newspaper, but like we aren't hearing about Helen Bruce. I don't think most people know her name.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known it had I not been plugged into people like you. And maybe I should have her on the podcast. It's just hard because there's only so many fucking people I can book on this thing. You know, and also too, it's like you're also dealing, and you know this, you're also dealing with people who don't know how to manage this sort of thing. I've never spoken publicly before, you know, so there's also that. You also have people who are reluctant to talk to people like me and you. But it's like, again, there's so much shit happening, so much injustice everywhere right now that it's impossible to keep up. And so we follow like these bigger stories, like this Somali, you know, this Somali fraud story, because it also feeds on something that we've all been feeling. We're all a little bit frustrated with the immigration situation.
Yeah.
And these people just so happen to be immigrants. So it feeds that anger and anxiety as well. And that's why the story has caught fire like it was. If it was a German, like, you know, Minneapolis is full of Poles and Germans. If it was like a Polish-German, you know, fraud ring that was operating, you know, Polish-German-American fraud ring operating in Minneapolis, nobody would have really paid much attention. But it just so happens that these people were Somalis, and it confirms what a lot of people had always felt like was happening.
Let me sort of related to that. I just want to mention this, buddy Ron. Ezra Levant put out a post. It was all over the place, but he goes, Mark Carney supports the state of Israel, Palestine against Israel, our closest ally and a democracy. But why is he not supporting the Iranian people? And I'm like, I got to get a cork board out to figure out who's the good guy and the bad guy. I thought the Iranians were the bad guys. I thought the Iranians were throwing gays off of buildings, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then on a dime, all of a sudden, Iran is the good guy. Like, people just believe whatever the hell they want to believe. It's the same thing, like you said, with the Somali thing.
Well, it's just the popular narrative, right? Like, if you notice with Rebel News will follow whatever the popular narrative is on social media.
Yeah, that's a bad example. Rebel News is horrible.
Yeah, no, but no, it's a great example because they're one of the most egregious, right? Like, they'll just follow whatever the trending topics are on social media, and then just agree with and reinforce whatever narratives are percolating there.
They got David Menzies constantly 24/7 chasing ambulances. That's his job.
Right. But like the thing is again, it's all narrative spin. Like, Rebel News is one of the more, excuse me, not to use this word twice, but egregious of the offenders. But there are a lot of them. Right. But this is how, like, these falsehoods continue to perpetuate. And this is why, you know, right now, the Carney liberals, previously the Trudeau liberals, CBC, and that whole environment never does anything to change anything, because they don't have to, because as long as the narrative on the other side is incorrect, then they don't really have to respond. The thing is that the only way to fight these people is with truth. And there's more than enough truth out there. Look at what Sam Cooper's doing. Look at what you do. I'm trying my best to be factually correct in the discussions that I'm having, the things that I'm saying. I'm not intentionally putting stuff out there that's wrong. I have been wrong at points, for sure. But what you have are a lot of grifters, a lot of people who are following trending topics and vomiting out the confirmation bias that will keep people engaging and keep people clicking. But the thing is the people who are engaging with that shit are taking that as gospel. They're believing it in the form that it's in, not understanding that it's designed specifically to grab their attention, keep them engaged, and generate ad revenue.
Yeah,
so
we're captured by the social media system, right? It rewards, it essentially rewards lies, anything that generates clicks.
It rewards sensationalism, because there are ways to sensationalize the truth to bring people in. You know, I do this sometimes with the clips from my podcast. Is I'll sensationalize a subject that we're talking about in that short 2-minute podcast to bring people in and get them to the episode, but I never deceive. Right? But the thing is, a lot of the sensationalism that you see on the internet travels into the realm of deception, because it's this game of constantly one-upping each other, right? Red light, breaking news, right? If your headline has to be more sensational than the other to drive that audience to you. And so, it's...
You know where you see this the most, the sensationalization, sensationalism? When a conflict happens, like when, let's say Israel and Iran, they start shooting rockets at each other, somebody will come in and she's like, you guys have no idea, Iran has the most technologically advanced rockets and they can shoot it this way and they can control it. It's like because it's happening so fast and people want the news, they go in there and they listen to these people, and their bullshit meter filter, it kind of gets turned off and they believe it.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's turned off. I think they've been trained to only believe the things that they want to believe. I think that's what it is. I think the algorithms and social media have trained us to block out the things that we don't want to believe to be true.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
That although we can peripherally see it, we don't absorb it because it conflicts with our own belief.
Yeah, but
it conflicts with the narrative that we want to believe to be true.
Yeah, but I view it from everything you just said. It's the word belief. It's a belief system, right? Like Muslims believe pork is bad, and the same way that somebody on the left believes carbon tax is good, somebody on the right believes carbon tax is bad. And under all of this, it's the fact that they're lazy. They're intellectually lazy. They're not going to sit down like you and me and think these things through. They're too busy. They want to go out there and have a steak, go to the club, pick up a girl. The rest doesn't matter.
But okay, you actually made a really good sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. I am off today with my ability to articulate myself. It's been a couple weeks, and I'm struggling with speaking. You brought up a really good example, climate change, for example, right? So with climate change, there are tens of thousands of scientists around the world who have refuted the official climate change narrative. They've provided data to show that the world is not getting hotter because of burning fossil fuels, that we have a ton of space between here and like an extinction level event, that we are not anywhere close to like destroying the entire planet. But the climate change zealots, when presented with that data, are always like, no, this is conspiracy stuff. Whereas with them, on their side of it, they're believing the academic research that supports the narrative. That who knows how that data is created or generated, but we do know a lot of it has to do with government funding, right? And that's the data that they hold up as being proof of climate change, and it's the one that we look at and refute as being propaganda because of where it originates and what it supports, right? And so it's like we each have two separate sets of data sets. Like we can't even agree on fundamental, just the basic fundamentals of our universe. Like we and it's getting worse by the year.
So I don't know if you recognize like how profound your statements are. If you talk to people, climate change supporters, anything you say, like you mentioned the CO2 levels are too low compared to Venus, or the cycle of the Earth and getting closer. Yeah. They have a counter argument for it. It's almost like these people went to like a climate change academy and they said, if Peyman says this, then say that. So you do this ping pong, and nothing. You don't advance on either side. They have the backing of all the three-letter agencies, so the CIA, NASA, every textbook, every university. They're all saying this. You cite 10,000 people, they'll cite 10,000 people. And if you say something that they can't attack, so if you say climate change is a CIA operation from 2010 to try to hijack the environmental movement to get Europe to deindustrialize so they're not using Russian oil and gas so that the Russian military will implode. They'll be like, oh, that's Russian disinformation. I've encountered that. Like when they accuse you of spreading disinformation, you're like, well, where do we go from here?
Well, that's it, right? But that's exactly it. Where do we go from here? How do we even have this conversation? How do we even come to an agreement that something's happening? What if something is happening and maybe, like they say, the truth is always in the middle. So how do we mitigate the damage from the shit that's actually happening? And how do we ignore the stuff that isn't actually happening? Why does it all have to be all the way in on one side or the other? Why can't we just create a bridge and meet in the fucking middle? Like, okay, we know with conclusive evidence that this is what's happening. Okay, how do we fix it? But you see, the problem is you let that devil in the door, and before you know it, you're fucking spraying gold flakes into the atmosphere to reflect the sun's light, like Mr. Burns did in The Simpsons, except in real life with Bill Gates, right? So it's like, this is the problem. You go from, okay, maybe we should try to like pull back on the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning on a daily basis and a yearly basis. Maybe it would be better for the planet if we didn't, just fucking burn fossil fuels at will whenever we need to. And maybe we do need to kind of restrict the amount of toxins that we're putting into the atmosphere we just should block out the fucking sun. You know what I mean? Like like how do we go from and that's what happens though, is that you let that devil in the door, you give it a little bit of space, a little bit of wiggle room, and it just goes to the extreme. It's the same way, and people are going to go crazy when I say this, but it's the same way we started at gay marriage and ended with child mutilation. Right? And I'm like, for me, like with the gay marriage thing, I was always like that was an intentional political cudgel. I don't know one human being who was against gay marriage. Like, to me, I don't give a fuck. Look, you can you want to marry a goldfish or a goat or another dude or a woman, whatever the fuck you want to marry, you're free to marry, man.
Could you imagine, right? Like, the gay people, they're like, we want to get married too, and married men, they're like, seriously? Are you sure?
You sure about that? Yeah. Right. But the point is like, look, I don't know a single human being who was against gay marriage, who actually had that as an issue in their mind, where they're like, okay, that's a step too far. Like, everybody was like, I think most people just assumed that gay people could get married when that issue came up, right? That was 100% used as a political cudgel. It was a democratic, liberal political cudgel. And then, so it became an issue. That's something that people were arguing about. And the argument was bigger than the original issue itself. And that's why it became an argument, because those flames were fanned and constantly in legacy media and in our political centers, right? But then 10 years later, you end with, cutting off the genitals of a 10-year-old boy who believes he may be a transformer or a girl. Right. And then that's what happens here.
Robots.
So that's the other thing too. Is like, you try to bridge that fucking gap and you end up with something much worse than what you started, Yeah,
I don't have any concrete answers for you. All I can say is it's not based on truth. It's based on belief. So you believe, you have a vision for where you want to go, and then you cherry pick facts to support that. If you drill it down to the foundational level, then you get to philosophy, and it's a little bit less disingenuous. So I believe in individual rights. I think that people should be sovereign, family units, I don't know, stuff like that, property rights, and somebody else could believe in collective rights, and we won't be able to compromise. But at least neither of us is thinking the other one's crazy. When you get to the high level, and then I'm like, well, statistics show based on this one fact that the places that have more property rights, the people are happier. Like, how do you quantify happiness, right? So yeah. So you're making this shit up. Is basically it.
I like that. I think that's where we end. I saw somebody in the comments say Christians are supporting gayness. I just want to say this for people who are watching. Jesus Christ never said anything about gay men or women. He didn't care. And if Jesus doesn't care, I don't care either. I don't follow a religion created by some other dude. I follow Jesus Christ and Jesus only. So sorry, I'm not turning this into a big long-winded rant, but I don't follow Paul and I don't follow the Old Testament. I follow Jesus and Jesus only. Peyman Ascari, I fucking love you, bro. I'm so happy we did this today. I still have cobwebs in my head. It's strange when you don't do this for a few weeks, your brain just shuts off, right?
Yeah. Get rusty.
Yeah, dude. So for everybody watching, I do want to say this before we go, because it looks like, well, we lost Substack and it looks like X shut down as well. I'm just gonna post the full recording for free for this one, because there were a lot of people, a lot of subscribers, people who wanted to tune in, who just lost the entire stream. And I know a lot of you aren't paying subscribers, but do like to watch the full stream. So for this one, I'm just going to post the full recording so you can watch the whole thing. Fucking, I don't know if it's Riverside, Substack, or X, or fucking all of them, but it looks like YouTube was the only one that hung in there. I would go to the comments, but dude, there's so many of them here. I don't even know where to start. Here, I'm just gonna go through and cherry pick a couple. You all right with that, Peyman? Do you got anywhere to be?
Go ahead.
All right. Christian says they go back to being like their ancestors. They may go back to living in teepees and long huts, riding bareback, warring. We've covered so much ground that when I'm going through these comments, you know what? I'm just gonna leave the comments for today, guys. It's our first day back, our first live stream of the new year. I'm fucking burnt already. It's like what, day 2 of 2026, and I'm already burnt. No, I really hoped to take a break during the holiday, but I didn't get one. And so I think I need a nap. And then I'm going to record my solo episode for Brave New Normal to kind of fill you guys in on what's going on. There are changes coming. And once again, one of those changes is the Behind the Wall live stream moving to Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, or 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But starting next Friday, these will be in the evening and not during the day. Peyman, before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you.
On X, you can find me at Peyman Ascari 451, and on YouTube, Rumble, Substack, my podcast is in lay terms.
Guys, I say this every single time, and I will say it again. Follow this man. Peyman Ascari is the best political analyst and commentator in this country, period. He is the best at what he does. I am a frequent listener to In Lay Terms. A lot of what you hear me talk about on Brave New Normal comes from Peyman Ascari. So go and subscribe at inlayterms.substack.com. Follow him on YouTube. Follow him on X. Something I do want to say once again, even though Substack completely shit the fucking bed on this live stream, what's really, really important, guys, is that we beat the algorithms. And the way to do that is by subscribing to our work, not just simply following. The truth is the algorithms control everything. It controls your ability to see this and to see other things that we're putting out there. So sign up on Substack, bravenewnormal.substack.com and inlayterms.substack.com. What that does is it gives you the ability to receive everything that we are putting out there direct to your inbox. You don't need to rely on the algorithms to feed it to you. It just goes straight to your inbox. I don't send spam or calls to action or any stupid shit. Neither does Peyman. Everything that you receive from us is always going to be a podcast episode or an essay or something that you might find valuable. For myself at Brave New Normal, you can sign up for free as a paid subscriber. Paid subscribers receive early access to podcast episodes, access to exclusive paid-only essays, and access to the full recordings of these live streams. It's $5 a month or $50 for the year. And through your paid subscription, you help me keep the lights on. Guys, again, just please sign up at Substack. That's my message today. Yeah, Substack ate shit with the live stream, but I have faith in it for the future. And this was rusty as shit. And I'm sorry, guys, if a lot of what I was saying today didn't make sense, but we'll be back next week, stronger, better, well-rested, all that good stuff. Peyman, I love you, brother. Always good to see you. And we'll be back next Friday.
Until Friday.